Hey there, and welcome to Explosive Enterprises. It's not often that we get to see much innovation in the 40mm launcher space, which kind of makes sense when you figure that they are usually just a housing for a linkage that connects a trigger to a firing pin. Hence, our curiosity was piqued when we saw the Acetech Volcano, which did seem to offer some new, albeit maybe a bit gimmicky, functionality with a built-in tracer unit and a focus on modularity with a number of different configurations. Though given that we don't do a ton of nighttime skirmishing, it wasn't something high on the list of things to go out and buy, so we were pleasantly surprised when Acetech reached out to us and offered to send us a review unit, complete with the full gamut of attachments. Full disclosure here, while Acetech did request a review, they did not put any editorial restrictions on the content of this video, so anything you see in here is our unvarnished opinions. We will never review products unless we have complete freedom to say what we think about them. With that out of the way, let's get into it. In the box, you get the launcher with a short pistol grip and 2 rails with the requisite mounting hardware. However, this is the deluxe edition, so you actually get 2 boxes. The second contains a folding stock, which is pretty clearly modeled after a SIG MCX stock, a 40mm shell holder for that stock, a trigger shock absorber, a Y-shaped rail, a triple rail or riser rail, a full-size pistol grip, a vertical grip, and 2 mini rail-mounted grenade launchers. And just a quick note on the mini launchers, we are going to have an entirely separate review for those, so keep your eyes peeled for that. For the launcher itself, you're looking at plastic, more plastic, and additionally, some plastic. The barrel and frame are 2 separate components, and each of those are composed of 2 clamshell halves that are fastened together. That being said, it is, according to Acetech, glass-reinforced nylon, and none of it feels especially chintzy or thin for being plastic. The stock is made of pot metal, but seems sturdy enough and has a nice rubber shoulder pad. The extended pistol grip and vert grip are also made of plastic with a nice rubberized coating to them, perfectly serviceable. The rest of the accessories, including the rail system upgrades, the stock-mounted shell holder, and the trigger shock absorber are, perhaps controversially, 3D printed. According to Acetech, these are all printed in ABS plastic using Polymaker filament, which I happen to be a pretty big fan of, and they do appear to have thought things through here. The prints were oriented in such a way that the layer lines are diagonal, meaning that the potential for delamination is minimized, and the use of ABS reduces the likelihood that things are going to melt in your car on a hot day. I might have a bit of a bias here since I've been fielding entirely 3D printed airsoft guns for years now, but I love the fact that airsoft manufacturers are starting to integrate 3D printed components into their guns. Doubly so when they seem to have done so with good design and manufacturing practices like Acetech seems to have done here. That said, these accessories are pretty much straight off the printer. There are a few blemishes here and there, and clear marks where support was used, though these are mostly on non-visible portions of the print when mounted to the launcher. Plus, there are plenty of people that are just really bothered by the layered look of 3D prints, and while I don't necessarily agree, that is an entirely valid opinion, so take that into account when considering the accessory package. The 2 rails that come with the launcher attach to the top and the left side of the barrel, and both move with the barrel when it is unlocked. There's also a shorter rail on the bottom of the launcher, though this is also where the USB-C port is located for charging the tracer system, so bear that in mind when positioning your attachments. The launcher does not come with any kind of iron sights by default, but the top rail does give you the means to attach a scope, so there is that. My preferred configuration of this launcher is with the long pistol grip, the stock, and with a single top rail attached. That's also how it was fielded for most of our testing, so let's take a look at the statistics for it in that configuration, and in the configuration you might use it in if it was mounted to another platform. With the stock collapsed, or with no stock, you're looking at an overall length of approximately 10.5 inches or 27 centimeters, which is quite compact. With the stock extended, it comes in around 20 inches long or about 51 centimeters, so still pretty compact. Weight-wise, this launcher feels basically non-existent at 629 grams, or about 1.4 pounds without a stock, and just over a kilogram, or 2.3 pounds with the stock attached, in both cases unloaded. Now, while it might not be our preferred configuration, we did still want to take a look at the potential rail real estate available with the full deluxe kit mounted. The Y rail mounts to the side of the launcher in the same manner that the default rail does, and uses the same mounting screws. The tri-rail is attached to the launcher using the same mount holes as the top rail, and additionally mounts to the right side of the launcher using 2 self-tapping screws that replace the existing screws in these holes. The riser rail fills in the blank space left by the female rail mount that you would normally use to mount the launcher to a gun, and is very handy if you intend to mount a scope to the launcher while using it in the standalone configuration. The stock attaches via a small length of rail at the rear of the launcher, meaning that the myriad of other rail-mounted stocks on the market should fit as well. And same deal for the pistol grip, which attaches using a standard AR grip pattern mount, allowing the use of whatever flavor of aftermarket grip you prefer. The twin shell holder mounts using the slots cut in the Totally Not an MCX stock and can be set up to mount on either side at various positions along the stock. Given that this launcher isn't ambidextrous, the natural place to mount it would be on the right side, but unfortunately this prevents you from folding the stock all the way, so that's a bit of a bummer. The shell holder also holds the shells in a vertical position, which is kinda weird and is a bit unsettling having 40mm shells pointed right at your face, but it seems like pretty small odds that would really become an issue. You do also have to yank on the shells pretty hard to get them out of the holder, which is good for making sure you don't lose them, but is kind of annoying for quick reloads. And finally, we have the shock-absorbing trigger cover. As weird as it sounds, this might actually be my favorite part of the deluxe kit, since A, it does a great job absorbing the valve recoil from higher powered 40mm shells, and B, I believe this is the first time I've ever seen an airsoft manufacturer acknowledge that valve recoil is a thing and actually design countermeasures against it. This shock absorber greatly increases the surface area of the trigger, which reduces the felt impact on your finger from the valve recoil from the shell. It doesn't do anything to prevent the internals from getting damaged by the recoil of high-power shells like ones filled with CO2, but we'll talk more about that in a bit. So with everything attached, you've got a whopping 8 attachment points for whatever your heart desires, including the 2 attached mini grenade launchers, which allows you to create things like this. Unfortunately, a warrant for my arrest has been issued by the International Criminal Court for the act of assembling this abomination, and I will be seeing you all in hell. We do want to make a note here that Acetech does not recommend that you disassemble this launcher. It has a number of fiddly springs inside, and the screws used for its assembly are self-tapping into plastic, so each time you disassemble and reassemble it, you're increasing your chances of cross-threading and stripping something out. Plus, really, it's a grenade launcher. There isn't much in there that you need to access for maintenance, and ideally, you'd have no reason to crack it open at all. Additionally, it uses a number of different screw lengths and sizes, which makes keeping things straight kind of a pain during the takedown process. If you absolutely have to disassemble it, I would recommend assigning a number to each screw hole and setting up some numbered trays to keep the corresponding screws in. Also note that this large cross pin needs to be removed to separate the frame and the barrel, and the top rail and pistol grip need to be removed to split the launcher parts in half once the screws are out. Once inside, we can see that we have a fairly standard direct action 40mm launcher with the force applied to the trigger directly pushing on the firing pin and the valve button on the shell. The trigger and trigger bar are made of glass reinforced nylon, and the firing pin, interestingly, is made of stainless steel. And that's definitely one of the toughest materials I've seen an airsoft manufacturer use for a firing pin, so it seems unlikely that this one will suffer the same fate as other 40mm launchers do when they run CO2 shells, which is destroyed firing pins. That said, I would be worried about the next link in the mechanical chain, which is that plastic trigger bar. We'll have to see how that holds up over time. The safety bar is also made of stainless steel, as is this little bullet-shaped pin. That pin is another interesting little piece of engineering that I can really appreciate. It's designed to force the loaded 40mm shell forward while the breech is closed, preventing it from rattling around even if you're loading shells that might be slightly undersized, as a bit of size variability is common with 40mm shells. The barrel and tracer unit is also split into 2 parts, with the removal of 2 additional self-tapping screws that are not visible until the barrel is separated from the frame. Inside, we can find a few protective pieces of acrylic designed to keep junk away from the tracer circuitry, and those just slide out once the barrel is split. The tracer unit can be removed by removing these 2 extremely tiny screws, accessible via a couple of convenient cutouts in the opposing circuit board. Another really nice manufacturing touch there. With those 2 screws out, you can unplug the JST connector to the battery and remove the LED array, which consists of 8 boards with 4 LEDs on each, with one board also having a control circuit and another also having a USB-C charging circuit. The battery is stuck into the launcher with double-sided tape and is absolutely not worth trying to remove, even for me, so that's going to stay right in there. It's a 420 mAh single-cell LiPo, and that seems to last for quite a long time, as I've not noticed the charge state changing even after having used it for all this testing. We would note that the system does not appear to be waterproofed in any meaningful way, and the warranty specifically does not cover water intrusion, so I would probably leave this at home on a rainy skirmish day. Like most grenade launchers, the controls are pretty simple here. You've got a nice and clicky rotary safety, a trigger, and a barrel release. Like the GL06, the barrel release is nicely positioned for your trigger finger to be able to actuate it after a shot, and the large cutouts for grabbing the shells make reloads a quick affair. One complaint here is that the barrel release spring appears to be kind of wimpy, and we did notice that it gets a bit sluggish, especially if you have a few accessories mounted to the rails. Beyond that, you have your tracer controls on the right side of the launcher. The power button controls the entire unit, and is also how you control the tracer functionality. A quick press of the power button turns the unit on with a single beep, and another quick press turns the launcher off with a flash of the tracer unit. A long press after turning the unit on will disable the tracer effect with 3 beeps, but will allow you to use the muzzle flash effect, which Acetech calls flame mode. The flame mode button controls the color of the muzzle flash effect, allowing you to cycle between red, orange, blue, green, purple, red-orange, purple-red, and off. Performance-wise, the Volcano's a bit of an odd duck. It is compatible with all the shells in our inventory, but as you may have noticed during the discussion of the internals, it doesn't actually have a barrel per se, or even really a proper breech, with one half of the breech basically just being some plastic ribs that properly position the 40mm shell. This is absolutely fine for all varieties of BB firing shells, but that means you really can't use projectile firing 40mm shells like Tag-ins, as those generally require a fairly substantial launcher barrel to support the thin plastic barrel of the shell itself. Footballs and foam rockets are definitely out here too, since without a real barrel, you don't get any kind of seal, and you could potentially damage the tracer unit. Speaking of the tracer unit, yep, that pretty much does what it says on the tin, and that's not that surprising given that Acetech has a pretty big catalog of tracer systems. With the Ace Hive 40mm shells that the Volcano was designed alongside, according to Acetech, you get great illumination, and looking at the shells themselves with that clear polycarbonate head, that's not a huge surprise. But what I did notice during the disassembly and going through the literature was that the tracer unit is positioned forward of any 40mm shell that is roughly the same length as the Ace Hive. And when you try putting tracer BBs into a normal shell and firing them, you basically get the same level of illumination. So it certainly is nice that the Volcano is perfectly capable of working as a tracer for other 40mm shells, but that does make me wonder why they bothered with the clear plastic for the Ace Hives. Who knows, maybe they have some other project in mind. In terms of overall practicality, it would be really tough to argue in favor of the Volcano over most other standalone launchers. The lack of ability to use foam rockets or tag-in shells limits this thing to basically just being a big shotgun. And frankly, while it's really fun to look at, the tracer system is a bit of a gimmick, plain and simple. On a normal rifle, a tracer system might help you guide in your shots during a night game, but on a single-shot grenade launcher, it's just a great way to look extremely cool while completely giving away your position. All that being said, and this is probably going to sound weird after that last bit there, if you treat the Volcano as just a big shotgun, it actually fits the bill reasonably well. I quite enjoyed using it during daytime games while completely ignoring the tracer system, and just using it as an extremely lightweight, compact, and overall handy boomstick. And while it certainly isn't a looker, at least in my opinion, the fact that it isn't based on a real 40mm launcher means that it's unburdened by the need to replicate the ergonomics of a real grenade launcher, which often conflict with the ergonomics that you'd want from something being used as a big shotgun, like oddly shaped stocks and ladder sights. So on the whole, at least for someone who prefers tag-ins and foam rockets like me, it is massively impractical. But if you're looking for a launcher to use as a meme cannon for BB shower shells, it's actually pretty tough to argue with the ergonomics of this thing, and the tracer system would probably be a neat party trick in an indoor environment. We'll finish things off by going through some positives and negatives. For positives, the Volcano does have some entirely unique capability with the built-in tracer unit, and that tracer unit works really well. The stainless steel firing pin is a really nice touch, especially coming off of having two launchers, one with a plastic firing pin and the other with a pot metal firing pin, completely shit the bed on me. The Volcano is also extremely lightweight and compact, and has solid ergonomics overall. And the deluxe kit can give you miles and miles of rail estate, if that's your thing, and offers a ton of possible modularity. For negatives, it really can't use high-powered projectile shells like tag-ins, nor can it use foam rockets, so you are limited to BB firing shells only. I would be slightly worried about the long-term durability of some of the plastic parts. If you have to have plastic, you could certainly do a lot worse than glass-filled nylon, but plastic is still plastic, and that trigger in particular does worry me a bit with high-powered shells. And to make use of the tracer system, shells need to be equal or shorter than the 108mm of the Acetech A-side shells, so longer high-capacity BB shells are going to be out of the running if you want to use tracer BBs. The Volcano is on the slightly more expensive side of 40mm launchers, and that goes into the quite expensive range if you add on the deluxe package. That being said, it is fully compatible with normal AR pattern grips and Picatinny mount stocks, so you might already have all the accessories on hand to turn this thing into a nice standalone launcher and/or horrifying abomination. That'll about do it for this one. If you have any questions or want to let us know what you think of the review, leave a comment below. And if you're interested in supporting us further, check out our merch store and pick up a patch or a shirt. Thanks for watching.